I'm the rector of Grays, but it's not going to be me that's chairing. I'm just welcoming at the beginning of the evening. I thought we'd maybe begin by lighting a candle that's to my side and just holding some silence as we remember all those caught up in the recent terrorist event. So we'll just begin by lighting a candle and being still. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. I'm going to welcome a colleague of mine, Reverend Canon Richard Jordan, who's going to chair this evening. Richard does the same role as I do across Thurrock in the Rochford district area. So Richard knows Thurrock, but isn't of Thurrock. So in the sense he doesn't bring any opinions or baggage of Thurrock this evening. So Richard's going to be in the chair, and a very warm welcome to all four of the candidates, to Tim, to Kevin, to John and to Jackie. We'd ask that people this evening behave in a way that listens to other people's views, even if we don't necessarily agree with them, and that we remember that we're in a place that's been here for a very long time. The oldest bit of this building is Norman, so nearly 1,000 years old, and so this building has been at the centre of Grays for all those centuries. And so we come together as the people of Grays and the Thurrock constituency this evening, but we'd ask that we just conduct ourselves in a way that's befitting for the venue that we're in this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Richard. Oh, I want to say some domestics, oughtn't I? If there is a fire, which we're not expecting, we exit by the doors on either the south or the north side, or should there be a problem there, through the doors at the east end of the building. There are toilets over there on the northeast corner of the building. You are allowed to go to the loo and get up if you need to. You're not trapped to the seats. We hope that you can hear and see. This isn't a BBC television studio, so therefore we're doing the best we can with our microphones. We've got one microphone for each of the panel, and we will be adjusting the sounds to try and make sure that everybody can be heard clearly. We're going to have some questions that have already been submitted through the Gazette, and hopefully as time allows there'll be an opportunity to ask questions from the floor, which we'll use this microphone for. So I'll take this to the back, and then we'll make sure when the question's asked, if you speak through the microphone, then everybody will be able to hear.
Thank you. We'll be starting by asking each of the candidates why you should vote for them, as a very general introduction, so that you get to know each candidate. And then, as Dan said, we will go through the questions that have been asked. I'd ask that we listen quietly. I'll try and keep the candidates to some sort of reasonable time if they seem to be going on. There will be opportunity after the set questions, or after the pre-submitted questions, to ask questions from the floor. Can I ask that you only speak if you have the microphone, because otherwise we simply won't hear the question. And that when we come to the questions, that they are questions. Everybody else here is here to listen to the candidates, not to you. So please just remember that we're expecting answers from the candidates, not lectures from the floor. So I'm going to start. We had a bit of a lottery to start with to decide who was going to sit where, and Jackie's in seat number 1, and she drew that by lot. So I'm just going to go straight across and start by asking Jackie, for about 3 minutes, why we should vote for you at this election.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Get this microphone working correctly. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Brilliant. Right, well, good evening, friends. This election is being called for one purpose only, and that is to enable the government to deliver on the Brexit and deliver the instruction which the British people gave us after the referendum last year. And the reason we've had to call an election is because at the moment we cannot deliver that, because parliamentary arithmetic makes that very difficult for us. And I should know because I was a government whip that whipped the votes on Article 50 to trigger that process. The simple truth is that the Labour Party have said they'll vote down any deal, the Liberal Democrats will vote down any deal, as will the SNP, and we only have a majority, a very small majority, and we can't really rely on that to get it through. Plus, the House of Lords have basically said that they will block any attempt to leave the European Union, and we can only tackle that by giving Theresa May a strong mandate in a general election. So Theresa May is asking for the strong endorsement of you to deliver that instruction. Now, in truth, if we lose just 6 seats, Theresa May will lose that majority, and the ability to deliver Brexit will be impossible. Now, Thurrock is one of those seats. So if all of you here really want to get the matter settled, to enable us to leave the European Union on the best terms for Britain, there's only one choice, and that's to vote for me. Now, I've served you as your Member of Parliament for the last 7 years. I've done so to the best of my abilities. As a politician, it's my job to take positions. Sometimes you'll like what I have to say, sometimes you won't. But I'll always be honest with you about the challenges we face as a community. I won't simply play to the gallery. And I won't just listen to noise. If there's one thing I've learned in this job for the last 7 years, the noise doesn't represent opinion. The quiet majority is very, very quiet indeed. So I'll continue to engage with you, I'll continue to have dialogue with you. I know many of you in this room get my emails and you're very forthright in giving me your opinions, and I'll continue to do that with you. I've done my best for the people of this constituency for the last 7 years. I've secured a lot of money from the government. I want to continue doing the same. So I promise you that if you elect me, I will continue fighting for you, and we'll have a strong government deliver what is actually the most challenging period in our politics, probably the most challenging for the last 40 years. Thank you for listening.
Richard, thank you. I've lived in Thurrock practically all my life. My parents moved from the East End of London when I was 18 months old. Both of my parents are here this evening. I went to school here in Thurrock. I've made my life here. It's where I brought up my family. My 3 children, one of whom is here, have all attended schools in Thurrock or are still at schools in Thurrock. My oldest son is at Palmer's, taking A-levels just next week. My youngest son goes to Hathaway Academy, which is the school that I went to when it was still Gray's Comprehensive School. But I have to say that just being local isn't enough. I think you need to put your trust in someone that has a record of delivery for Thurrock. And I believe that I have that record of delivery over the last 20 years and more. As leader of Thurrock Council, we set the lowest council tax in Essex year in, year out, despite having to deal with record government funding cuts at the same time, as well as having to rebuild council finances. As well as doing that, we managed to raise school standards in our primary schools, which were amongst the lowest in the country. When I became leader of Thurrock Council, just 1 in 3 of our youngest children were going to schools that were rated as good or outstanding by Ofsted. By the time I left, that was up to 95%. And at the same time, we created 1,600 new primary school places. We were building meaningful numbers of council homes for the first time in a generation, and we changed the rules and allocation of council homes so that you had to have been in Thurrock for 5 years before you could be considered for from one of those hearts. I played a crucial role in creating what's known as the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, a body that exists across the counties of Essex and Kent and of East Sussex. And through that, I've led successful bidding rounds, getting money close to £100 million for the widening of the A13, money to convert the old courthouse in Grays into a small business unit that's now 2/3 full with new businesses in town, and money to improve Grays Town Centre. I believe that I have the local connection that we want to see in a Member of Parliament, and I believe that I have a record in delivery. Thank you.
So, good evening everybody, and thank you for being here and taking time out of your lives to come and see me. Can everyone hear me first of all? Yeah. Great. So, first of all, a little bit about me. I've come from Essex, I've lived here all my life. I first moved to Thurrock 10 years ago, and it's somewhere that I've come to consider home, which is why I've decided to stand here for this very important general election. And I've got a campaigning background. Many of you might know that I stood forward to be Essex's Police and Crime Commissioner. Last year I campaigned up and down the county, so I would take that same energy and campaign for you day in, day out if you elected me as your Member of Parliament on Thursday. But what I would like to say is that most of what Jackie said to you a few moments ago is a complete fabrication. She says that this election is about Brexit, but it's not about Brexit. It's not about me and you, it's about Theresa May. She would like another 5 years to do as she wants, to cut our police to the bone, to cut our NHS, to cut education. Jackie says that for the last 5 years, for the last 7 years, that she has delivered for you. In those 7 years, she said that she had stopped the Thames crossing, which is now going ahead. That was one of her leaflets in 2015. That was something that she claimed credit for. She says that on the current parliamentary arithmetic that she cannot get Brexit through. She says she knows that because of her knowledge as a government whip. But the truth is that 3/4 of MPs in Parliament voted to trigger Article 50. 2/3 of members of the House of Lords voted to trigger Article 50. And no party said they'll reject any deal without seeing the detail first. So I'm afraid that by trying to call a Brexit election, this has really backfired on Theresa May because this has turned the light onto all of those shortcomings. She said the other day after the horrific attacks in London that enough was enough. And she says this completely forgetting that for the last 7 years she was our Home Secretary. And these failures have all happened on her watch. Now on Thursday, you have a real opportunity in this election that nobody but Theresa May actually wanted to happen. It's your vote, it's your choice. You have a vote to increase spending on our police, increase spending on our NHS, and you have a chance to vote to change Britain's future. Now only a vote for me and the Liberal Democrats can deliver that. We're the only real alternative to Theresa May's extreme Brexit government that will cut funding and wreck our economy. Jeremy Corbyn cannot deliver. He won't be a good Prime Minister, he's not a Prime Minister in waiting, but we do need a real opposition because this isn't an election, as Theresa May's called it, it's a coronation. So I'd ask on Thursday for you to vote for me, vote for Liberal Democrats. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is the election campaign they said was never going to happen. We were told there was going to be no election until 2020, and then all of a sudden a change of mind. Well, this election should be about change, shouldn't it? We're facing the biggest change this country has made. We bravely decided to vote to leave the European Union. Upwards of 70% of the people in Thurrock voted to leave the European Union. We didn't listen to the big media who said that the sky would fall in, that World War III would start. We didn't listen to the big politics that wanted business as usual. We didn't listen when they said we couldn't survive on our own. And this is the point now. Without UKIP, there'd have been no referendum. Without UKIP, there'd have been no outvote. And now, at the final hurdle, we need to stay in the race to make sure we get the Brexit you all voted for. That means getting back control of our borders. That means getting back control of our laws, getting back control of our money to our own trade deals, to make sure that we have a big player on the global stage. Now, do we want to throw that away? Do we want to take a chance on Remainers? Or do we want a genuine Brexit voice in the House of Commons that will make sure that we get the job done? Well, we need to change things in Thurrock. Look at the changes that have happened over the past 5 or 7 years. 2 police stations closed, Grace Walking Clinic gone, threats towards the hospital. We see change around, but in the wrong direction. Now, I'm a local man, born and brought up in Avery. I live just down the road in Grace. I've seen the changes, and I'm not happy. That's why I'm presenting myself now, to hopefully win your support, to be your voice in Westminster, to get the change and get the recognition we deserve. You know, we're the beating heart of the country. We've got 2 ports. We've got Lakeside. We've got incredible potential, and we deserve to be recognised. And only with the UKIP MP, that little bit of purple on the map, will we finally be recognised. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You can vote for another backbencher, or you can vote for someone in the House of Commons that will get Thurrock noticed. You know I'm from Thurrock, and I want to be for Thurrock. And I want to be your Member of Parliament to bring us the money, the infrastructure, and the recognition we deserve. Thank you.
Can I thank the candidates for keeping so well to time? Excellent, thank you. The general rule is that we'll keep to 2 minutes in answers to the set questions. The first question that's been given, which is of a sort of general nature, is there has been a lot of talk since 2010, and I guess before that as well, of making difficult decisions and hard choices. Could the candidates please give their personal definitions for a difficult decision and a hard choice? And perhaps you'd address for whom they are difficult decisions and hard choices. And I'm going to ask John to start the answer to this question.
Richard, thank you. I think very often when politicians use phrases like difficult decisions or hard choices or tough decisions, what they're actually doing is they're using it as cover, as a smokescreen for making the kind of decisions that we know hit the kind of ordinary working people that are here today. If you think about it, we've been told by the coalition government originally that a tough decision was restricting public sector pay, making sure that police officers, nurses, the men and women who clean our streets and empty our bins had either no pay rise or just a 1% pay rise every year since 2010. Theresa May, 3 weeks ago, told us that a difficult decision was scrapping the winter fuel allowance for up to 10 million older people. They said that was a difficult decision, but actually the real difficulty is only for those pensioners that will lose the allowance and will go back to being fearful of opening that winter fuel bill. Then we have things like the bedroom tax. Again, we were told that was a tough decision. How hard or difficult, though, was that really for those Conservatives and Liberal Democrats who introduced it, those who voted it through? I can tell you that it's nowhere near as tough as it's proved for the many people that have had to live with it. It's not always tough, though, of course. When they agreed to cut income tax for people earning £150,000 or more, or to cut corporation tax for large corporations, that's the flip side of those tough decisions, of those difficult decisions. Ordinary people are paying the price so that the wealthy can maintain their lifestyles. Thank you.
Jackie, could I ask you to...
Tough decisions are necessitated to enable a country to live within its means. And just to put it in context, when we assumed office in 2010, the annual deficit was £150 billion. Now, that probably doesn't mean very much to any of you, but if I tell you that was more than we were spending on the NHS and education combined, that is the size of the amount that we were overspending by. So we cannot carry on like that. Our finances have to be sustainable, because otherwise we're just dumping debt on our children and our grandchildren. And I, as a politician, in all conscience, cannot do that. So we have to decide what our priorities are. We have to decide how we can actually get our finances back under control. We prioritise health, we prioritise schools, but also, you know, just to challenge what John's just said, we also want to make life easier for people who are working hard, doing the right thing, but for whom life was a struggle. So we've increased the basic tax allowance. 31 million taxpayers are paying less in tax. The average taxpayer has an extra £1,000 of disposable income. We've taken 1.3 million people out of paying tax altogether. So this idea that this government has just been favourable is absolute nonsense. We've done our best to support the vulnerable. Pensioners now have an extra £1,250 a year. And as for this scaremongering about the winter fuel allowance, it's absolute bunkum. We will make sure that the poorest pensioners continue to get it, but actually people like Richard Branson shouldn't get the winter fuel allowance when there's working families that also struggle to pay their fuel bills. Now, I'm very confident we made the right decisions to secure the future of our country and to do our best for the people today. And we'll continue making those sensible decisions because, do you know what? There is no money tree. The only money that we can spend is what we collect from you all as taxpayers, and we should always remember that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Tim to answer the question, please.
Well, you all made the difficult decision in June last year. Nigel Farage told me that when he started UKIP, and when he would go around at public meetings where there'd be one or two people, he said, "We will leave the European Union," and they laughed at him. Well, they're not laughing now, are they? We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make the tough choice at this election to make sure that we do not throw away that 23 years hard work to get that referendum that they never wanted to give us, to get the outvote we got that they never wanted us to have, to make sure that we get the right Brexit deal. Now, already the government has shown signs of backsliding. At the Brexit negotiations debate in the European Parliament, UKIP put forward amendments to end free movement after Brexit. Labour voted against and the Tories abstained. On this big divorce bill they want us to pay, we put down an amendment not to pay it. Labour voted against and the Conservatives abstained. At the first hurdle, they let the country down. They let the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the European Union down. Now, without the UKIP voice in House of Commons, because without us there'd have been no outvote, no referendum. Without us there, all of that will go up in smoke. We can be out of it, and we can still be paying into it. We can be out of it and still have free movement. We can be out of it and still accepting every single law going from the European Union. So the tough choice we've got to make now is to decide, do we want to follow through on that outvote and make sure we finish the job and that we keep us out? Or do we throw away all that hard work and the biggest decision this country has ever made, 17.4 million people voting to leave the European Union? That's the choice you've got to make. And it's not up to us on this table, it's up to you. Do you want genuine Brexit voices in Parliament? If so, then support me, the UKIP candidate, and we can finish the job.
So I do think we have a lot of difficult choices ahead of us, and I think it's an excellent question. I think Jackie was right to point out there is no magic money tree, but you wouldn't actually know it to read the Conservative manifesto. In that manifesto, there is not a single costing, and the only numbers you'll see are along the bottom of pages, because they think they can get away and they can take you for granted. They think their tiny committee can write a manifesto and pull the wool over your eyes. Now, in the Liberal Democrat manifesto, what we've said is we want to be honest with you about how we're going to pay for the commitments that we've outlined in our manifesto. We've outlined a penny in the pound on income tax, and we think that will raise around £7 billion to invest on our NHS. This is the amount that the Chief Executive of NHS England said that was needed just to continue investing in services and to secure the future of the NHS. We proposed a modest increase in corporation tax that still keeps us below most of what mainland Europe are charging corporation tax, and that would pay for additional funding for our police officers. So we do think there are a lot of difficult decisions. We're not quite out of the woods yet, but I do think the Conservatives are making an ideological choice to continue pursuing austerity at a time when we're seeing record levels of growth across the country. A lot of people in this room either work are public servants or know public servants, and they know that our nurses who make our NHS tick are still facing a 1% pay increase year on year. The Liberal Democrats have said that there is the money to stop this pay freeze and to reward our public servants in the way that they deserve to be. So there are lots of difficult choices, and there's one coming up this Thursday. But it's your vote, it's your choice, and on Thursday you can vote Liberal Democrat and you can change Britain's future.
I'm conscious that there are folk wanting to ask questions. We did say that we go through the submitted questions first. And I appreciate it might be a
this isn't actually a question.
Well,
I was the person who asked that question, who submitted that question, and I asked for people's personal view or personal definition of what those terms meant. The only person who seems to have given one is John Kent.
I think people can make up their own minds about the answers that they've given. I'm going to ask it that we stick to the submitted questions to start with, and so I'm going to go on to the next question, which is about immigration. In what ways do you think immigration has been a force for good, and how has it had a detrimental effect on the welfare of the citizens of this country? So there's two sides to the question, the upside and the downside, and I'm going to ask Kevin to start with that question.
Thank you. So, clearly I talked about the NHS a little while ago, and we know so many of our doctors and nurses in the NHS come from abroad because without them the NHS simply wouldn't function. I think immigration has made a really positive contribution in that respect, but when I talk to people who have grievances with immigration, it always comes back to the fact that successive governments of different colours have failed to invest in infrastructure, in local services, and actually keeping up with the pace of immigration. I think when you look at the fact that immigrants make a positive fiscal impact every year, they pay more tax into the system than they take out, we really should be seeing governments take the decision to actually invest that money in making your local areas better. I do think in this area, particularly Thurrock, is always overlooked. We're seeing successive closures of NHS services, the Grays Walk-in Centre. We're being dumped on with this crossing that no one wants. And I don't think we're seeing the investment in local services that people want to see. And I think if we want to make a positive case for immigration, and there are positives to immigration, we need to actually show to people that we can pay for the impact that immigrants do have, because they do take up housing, they will use services, and we need to actually invest to keep up with that demand, that increasing demand. And I think in the Liberal Democrat manifesto there is proposals to make that positive investment to make people's lives better. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Tim to.
Immigration is great when it's properly controlled, and in recent times it's become an issue because it's got out of control. Previous election campaigns always used to be about the health service and about education and public services. But when people are asked what issues do they most care about, immigration has crept up at number one because successive governments have promised to get immigration under control and simply haven't. And last year, people voted primarily to leave the European Union because immigration was running out of control. Migration Watch estimated that we need to build a house once every 4 minutes to keep up with current levels of immigration. We have a housing crisis in Thurrock. We've got 8,000 people on the housing waiting list. We've got private rents going up. The number of people who come into my office with Section 21s with their landlords kicking them out. We've got serious problems with the strain on public services. And the vote last year was a vote to reclaim control of our borders and manage immigration properly so it can be a benefit to this country. And that's the thing. Theresa May, time and again, has got up and said that net immigration should go down to the tens of thousands. And each time she has failed. Do you want to keep rewarding that sort of failure? People stand up here for your right, your democratic right, to put that cross on a bit of paper because you want that person to do exactly what they say. And time and again, on immigration, the Conservative Party has failed. We can't go on. We can't go on rewarding that sort of failure. So we need a UKIP voice in the Commons to make sure there's a threat to the other parties that if they don't deliver, we will be back again. We will be up there in the polls and we will actually hold them to account on this. We've got that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get that Brexit where we have a proper Australian-style points-based system which is universally supported across the political spectrum. I mean, it's quite amazing to read some of the literature now. You've got the Labour Party pledging to end free movement with Diane Abbott as Home Secretary. Can you quite believe that? Well, I suppose immigration will be reduced if Diane Abbott's counting them. So there's the choice. There's the choice. The Liberal Democrats want free movement. They want to stay in the European Union. The Labour Party is now trying to sound like UKIP because they're losing votes. They're losing supporters to UKIP. And the Conservative Party, again, are sticking to the old rhetoric where they can turn up at election time, say what you want to hear, and then when they're in, go back on it. Don't let them get away with it again.
Well, I think immigration's enriched this country. I'm myself a third generation Irish. I'm sure many people in this room can trace their heritage back to other countries. And that's because Britain has always been a liberal country, a welcoming country. And for those of us who are lucky enough to be born British, I don't think we should be surprised that we live in the best country in the world and so many people want to come here. And the truth is, as Kevin said, most of these people come to work and they come to do jobs that we desperately need filling. As Kevin mentioned, the NHS relies heavily on immigrant labour. Here in Thurrock we have schools having to go to Canada and Ireland to recruit teachers. So overall, immigration is benefiting this country. But it does need to be controlled and it must be lawful. Now, one of the benefits of leaving the European Union is that free movement will end, and there are people who have been taking advantage of our welfare system and living as benefactors. That will end. We also need to really tackle the traffickers that are taking advantage of people who are desperate to come here. It's people smuggling, it's organised criminal activity, and it's wrong, and we need to tackle that internationally. But I do worry when immigration is being blamed for other things that are wrong in the system. You know, it's not the fault of migrants that we've had for decades a failure to build enough houses, both by market and by government. That's not the fault of migrants. That's a policy failure by us. You know, immigrants and the taxes they pay are a net contributor to the Treasury. It's not their fault that they're not causing a burden on public services. And if there's one thing, I was always ambivalent at the referendum last year. I think Britain's a great country. There were risks in leaving, a risk in staying in. There would have been benefits from doing either. But what actually tipped me over into voting for Remain was just the ugliness of the debate and the arguments perpetrated by the Brexit side, because it was all about immigration. And that kind of angry nativism that's being unleashed is unpleasant and it's un-British. And I would say, I don't care whether you were born in Lagos, London or Little Thurrock. Everyone has an equal stake in this community and we should all respect each other.
Things you never thought you'd hear yourself saying, but I agree with much of what Jackie's said. Thurrock as a place has benefited hugely from immigration down the years. Much of Thurrock has been built on the back of wave after wave of employment-led immigration. If you think about it, in West Thurrock, Vandenberg's, the company built up from Europe. In East Tilbury, I know its constituency, Barters built up by Eastern Europeans, by people from Czechoslovakia. If you look at the port of Tilbury, built by immigrant Irish labour, generation after generation have come to Thurrock, have helped us to build Thurrock and helped to make it the place that it is today. As others have said, we have about 5.5 million people from overseas working in our economy, paying tax, paying national insurance and delivering services, very often delivering those kind of public services, looking after old people, delivering care in people's homes that frankly we struggle to fill if we were only relying on British people to do those jobs. Equally, we do have to acknowledge that immigration in the numbers that we've seen over recent years does put a strain on services. That's why a Labour government would reinstate the Migrant Impact Fund that was scrapped by the coalition, and it is why the Labour Party will sign up and make sure that freedom of movement ends when we leave the European Union. Thank you.
Our next question is around education. In particular, about the effect of faith education. At the moment, the only two primary subjects that a parent can withdraw their child from are sex education and religious education. As a member of staff, in a very diverse primary school, I personally think all children should learn about the many faiths of this world. What is your view, candidates, about this? And is it something you believe needs to be changed? Should all children learn about all faiths? And I'm going to start by asking Tim.
I won't need the 2 minutes for this. Yes. I mean, the best education is learning about everything. You know, that's the purpose of education, to build people up to go into the wider world, to make choices best for them, best for their family, best for their community. And taking people out because someone disagrees with something, I don't agree with that. I think, you know, we're to be a more enlightened community, a more enlightened country, we have to learn about different faiths, different cultures and religions, so that we can understand our world better. You know, we're in a world that is very dangerous and very hostile. And I think if people were to appreciate and know where people are coming from more, we'd be in a much more tolerant and safer world.
So I won't be saying this very much tonight, but I'll absolutely endorse everything that Tim just said. And I do think it's an excellent question. I do think that we are enriched by learning more about other people. We do live in a dangerous world, and part of that is that I don't think we understand each other quite as much as we used to. We live in very small communities, we don't really know our neighbours anymore. And I think it's part because we all live in our sort of silos. We don't learn much about other faiths, about other ways of life. And I think school's the best way to do this. I think at school you should learn about religion, you should have a proper civic education where you learn about democracy, politics, how to get involved, about changing the world. And I think at this point we prepare our children to be the best people they can be, to fully partake in their community, and to be full citizens. And I think part of that is learning about how the world works, how society works, and all about religion. So I do think that faith education should be an integral part of that.
Thank you. And John.
Yeah, I too believe that all children should receive a fully rounded religious education. I think it's only by learning about others' beliefs, and I think that should encompass all the major religions of the world, that we can really understand why people act and behave in the way they do, understand what their customs are, what their practices are, what their beliefs are. And I think that by doing that, we soon come to realise that no matter what the faith that somebody professes, we have more in common with each other than that divides us.
Well, there's not much that I can add to what has been said. I myself have the benefit of a Catholic education, and certainly the values that taught me set me in very good stead. But I think the only point I would just like to add is, at the moment, we are under attack by people who are attacking us in what they claim is in the name of their God. And the more we can do to make people understand, and it starts in schools, that they are perverting Islam and they are not representative of Islam, the better. So absolutely, we should make sure that we're teaching much more in schools.
I think we've just heard all the candidates agree about something. I expect change on this. Wonderful, thank you. We move on to health. There's somebody who's had, Hannah's had some bad experiences in terms of health, and she concludes, in my opinion, our health service is broken. I feel that radical change needs to happen in order to make patients and loved ones feel safe. What do you plan to do to ensure that patient care and treatment in Thurrock is consistently of a high standard? What do you plan to do in order to hold hospitals and trusts accountable for their performance and treatment, especially if they are in failing areas. Hang on. I'm going to ask Jackie to start with this, please.
Thank you. I think the case that was referred to was about sepsis, and sepsis actually is one of the cause of many avoidable deaths, and unless we get patients treated with antibiotics quick enough, it can lead to death. So the more we can do to raise awareness on that, both amongst ourselves, but also within other settings, then the more that can be avoided. And I say that with some personal experience. One of my colleagues had a sore throat, and 5 days later he was on life support with multiple organ failure, and that's how quickly it can move. So a lot depends on better education as to how to look for those kind of symptoms. In terms of local health services, I'm going to be brutally honest, I think we've been shortchanged here in South Essex for many, many years. We haven't had very well-performing GP services, and that's what's led to more excess demand at Basildon Hospital. And I agree with the questioner. In order to fix that, that needs some pretty radical reform. And I'm pleased to say that actually everyone's stepping up to the plate. We've got Claire Paniker at Basildon Hospital working closely with the local council, with MPs and with ministers to come up with a plan. What we need, we've been inspecting GPs and we're identifying those who aren't coming up to spec. They're being challenged to improve or else they'll be replaced. We shouldn't be expecting people to go to Basildon or Orsett Hospital when some of those things can be provided more locally. So we'll be looking at developing new enhanced medical centres, and the plan is to have one in Tilbury, one in Purfleet and one in Grays. So the radical reform that's needed is to have better local services that are more accessible to people when they need care and more immediately, so that we make sure that Basildon Hospital is actually doing the things that we expect it to do, really focusing on the things that we really need a hospital to do. So yes, it's a big challenge, but yes, we're on it. And specifically on tackling failure, I think people know that I've got forward on this, and I was leading the challenge against Basildon 5 years ago. It led to it being put in special measures, but I'm pleased to say that that's much improved. I think there's still an ongoing challenge at Basildon regarding its administration, and that needs to be fixed, but I'll be continuing my discussions with the management to achieve exactly that.
I think Hannah says that she feels or fears the NHS is broken. I'm not sure that it's broken. It's certainly understaffed, it's certainly underfunded, and it's certainly under pressure. Thurrock, as a whole, has 37 GPs too few to meet the national average. We have GPs with lists in Thurrock of 8,000 or 9,000 patients, where the average across the country is something like 3,400. So we desperately need to see more GPs, because frankly, overworked doctors, overworked GPs will make mistakes. Too often, they don't have time to care. Everybody here tonight will have an experience of either themselves or someone close to them having to wait too long to get a GP appointment. And that's something that we really do need to see tackled. Hospitals clearly have issues. Again, the care that's provided, certainly at Basildon Hospital, I have recent experience of it, when it's good, it's exceptional, but it is still patchy. You still have, at times, too few nurses on duty to be able to guarantee safe levels of care. And frankly, the only way that we're going to overcome this, the only way we're going to tackle it, is by putting the money that we need to into our health and social care system. So the Labour Party will put £30 billion into the NHS over the next 5 years, funded by increasing income tax on people earning over £85,000. That is the top 5% of earners in the country. We'll also find money by increasing the rate of tax that's paid on private health insurance. But as well as that, we do need to look at what are known as the sustainability and transformation plans. These are the plans that are being drawn up and down the country. Here in Thurrock, the transformation plan sees Basildon Hospital working with Broomfield and working with Southend. It means bringing together the 3 accident emergency units, which will see 2 of them downgraded. And I believe that these transformation plans have been too secretive. I don't believe that enough people know enough about them. That's why I'm glad that the Labour Party in the manifesto says that it will put a halt, a temporary halt on these plans, allow the public to get more involved, because after all it's the public that know what the care needs are. And these plans should be driven by care needs, and not as they are at the moment, by funding cuts. So we need to do that. And finally, I've said it before and I say it again, the overstretched people working in our health service, the nurses, the doctors, the porters, the radiographers, the people who make the hospitals work, deserve a pay rise. That's why we'll end the pay cap and allow people to get more than the pitiful 1% pay rise that they're allowed at the moment.
Thank you.
So we do have many challenges with our NHS. I know since moving back to Thurrock, trying to access health services here has been at some points a nightmare and other times a lottery. I know the walk-in centre was closed, and that was primarily where I used to go to receive care when I needed it. And I remember calling 101 one day, and I described my symptoms, and they said, okay, it's not urgent, but if you get to a GP. And they said to me, but you can't register for 2 weeks. You have to submit a paper form and it will be processed within that time. And I said, well, that's not acceptable, can I do it online? And they said, the forms aren't available online, you have to come in. And I said, at this point, is there no other way I could be seen? And they said, we could go to the walk-in centre in Gravesend. Now, for many people who aren't mobile, it doesn't seem acceptable to me. There are many challenges on NHS, and actually healthcare needs to be local. You can't expect people to travel around to receive healthcare, especially with an ageing population that's becoming less mobile over time. These health services need to be local. The second part is that the Liberal Democrats, as I said earlier, have outlined an investment plan in their NHS, which will raise around £7 billion a year. So it's a penny on a pound in income tax, an amount that none of us would miss, but all of us would benefit from. Now, the third part of the crisis in our NHS, and it is reaching a crisis, is that we do have a recruitment problem. We will need more nurses as our society changes, as it grows, but the government has recently decided to abolish free tuition for student nurses, which means that nurses that start off on a salary of around £18,000 to £19,000, which is already pitifully low, will start repaying their student loans at this point. And that doesn't seem to me to be acceptable. So this is why I think we need to look at a system where we can actually give our nurses free tuition, so that when they start on these low wages, they don't feel the need to, as many have done, go to food banks, which Theresa May says has many complex causes. Not low wages, not being penalised by these crippling tuition fee payments. But I do think we need to treat the people, the staff who work in our NHS, with a lot more dignity in order to continue to recruit the best staff in the world. Now, I think that's the way that we get back to an NHS that's sustainable, that's excellent, and provides the world-class care that we've come to expect from it.
Thurrock is the 3rd largest authority in the country without hospital. That is a staggering thought, isn't it? You know, we're nearly 250,000 people without a hospital. We were promised one not so long ago, and no one has fought for it. No one. So why would you think about rewarding the same people with 5 more years when, again, at election time, they tell you everything, they bring out the magic money tree and say, yes, it's all going to be good, when they won't fight for us? One of the big problems with GP recruitment is retaining them. And someone needs to grab NHS England by the lapels and say, we need GP training centres here. We need to turn some of our surgeries into GP training centres, because when GPs come to train, they put down roots and they stay. That's how we start to fix the healthcare crisis we have in Thurrock. But also, we need to, I'm going to agree with my Liberal Democrat colleague here, it's getting a bit of a habit, isn't it? Why are we making it difficult for people to go into one of the most important professions You know, we should not penalise people who want to take medicine, who want to pursue a medical or clinical career with debt. We need to encourage them. We need to get rid of the fees with it and give them grants to make sure that we have the GPs and the care that we need. We need someone to go and fight for Thurrock. We've heard lots of problems. We've had all the problems, but where are the solutions? You know, the last campaign we all sat around here and the Grace Walking Centre was open. That's gone. How many more cuts to our NHS in Thurrock are you going to put up with? We always promised jam tomorrow, jam tomorrow. Well, we want it today. We want to have the health services today. We want someone to go in from day one and say to NHS England, we want the GP training centres. We want to say when we get our Brexit money back, we want that hospital here. You saw it all on the bus, didn't you? 350 million for the NHS. Let's have someone in there who will hold them to account. We can't go on rewarding failure because things will get worse and worse and worse, not just for us, but for future generations in Thurrock.
We now have another health-related question, this time about mental health. Could I ask the candidates what their views are on mental health and what their parties are planning to do to bring about better mental health services? And I'm going to ask John to start.
I think the problems we have around mental health are probably the biggest kind of hidden challenge that we have. If we look purely in terms of numbers, since 2010 we've lost over 6,600 mental health nurses. We need to take action to start to reverse that, to put that right as soon as possible. To do that, we need to both increase the funding that's available for mental health, but we also need to make sure that that funding is ring-fenced for mental health, because at the moment, too often, it's siphoned off into other areas of the NHS. We need to make sure that that money that's earmarked for mental health goes where it's needed, to the front line. I think we also need to look at what I think is a real scandal of children with mental health issues being treated on adult mental health wards. Over half of adults with mental health issues are presenting with symptoms by the time they're 14 years of age. Less than 10% of mental health funding, though, goes into services for children and young people. You know, clearly we need to be making sure that there's proper funding going in to really early intervention. And you know, there are some terrifying statistics around. The most common cause of death now for boys aged 5 to 19 is suicide. You know, that is an absolute scandal, and it shows us that we do need to increase funding for mental health services, and especially for early intervention. The other thing that we've got to do is to end the practice, which is still too widespread, of sending people across the country to get the treatment that they need. I know that the current government has pledged to end that, but we need to bring the date for ending it forward. We need to bring that forward to something like 2019. I think it was again a question from Miles. It's a hidden crisis, but it's one that, regardless of political party, we've got to step up to the plate and start to resolve.
Well, I can advise you that Theresa May's made this her personal priority. She's going to replace the 1983 Mental Health Act and bring that up to date. There's a promise of 10,000 more staff members in the NHS to deal with mental health issues. There's also a plan to make sure that every school has a teacher who's trained to identify people who are showing symptoms of anxiety and depression at an early age, to address the point that John's just made. And a final thing will be to change discrimination laws for employment to make sure that people aren't discriminated against when they're suffering from mental health issues. Overall, and I do detect a sea change in society now. I think we've all become a lot more aware of just how significant mental health issues are. And you know, I mean, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, I've had 2 people very close to me who who've been suffering from quite significant problems. And I just think we all collectively need to be more willing to encourage people to seek help earlier. I think it's one of those taboos that people aren't prepared necessarily to
I'm sorry, the help isn't there. It's not there.
Well, I'm just telling you what our plan is, and that's the answer.
Yeah, if you need help, what good is it if you have to wait 4 weeks to get it? And this goes back to the comments I made some time ago, that if you need that urgent help, it will not help you if you have to wait weeks on end. We need to have the GP training centres in Thurrock to make sure that if people do need to get the help and get the treatment, they're able to get it. And platitudes and promises, this has been going on. This isn't just something that's come out of the blue. And I see people who come in, they've got mental health problems, they have trouble with housing, they have trouble with the the benefits changes haven't exactly helped. They've just made matters incredibly worse. And we need to make sure we need to bring the money home. Okay, we put in our manifesto. We're going to bring the money home. No more 14 billion in foreign aid. We're going to reduce our foreign aid to 0.2% of GDP. If it was good for Barack Obama, it's good for us. So that we can have the doctors, we can have the nurses, we can have the health professionals that people need to see when they need to see them.
So I'd like to thank Miles for the question. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. I've been working on with other people for a number of years. The way that the NHS has traditionally dealt with mental health problems has been nothing short of disgraceful. It has been the Cinderella of the NHS for a number of years. Up until the coalition government, we had separate care pathways. They treated physical health and mental health as completely separate phenomena, despite the fact that they interact and intersect in many different ways. Now, something we did in the coalition government was introduce these minimum wait times. Now, we know too often that they're missed, and for the people that are most in need, they're often too long. Now, if it was as simple as waiting 4 weeks to actually access mental health services, for many people that would be a dramatic improvement on what they currently have. I know so many people who have been told that they have to wait 18 months to receive counselling sessions. And for someone who's struggling with bereavement, anxiety, depression, it's not good enough, and for many people it won't be soon enough. Now, what we've said is that we want to create a joint care pathway so people are treated as whole persons, the physical and the mental is treated at the same time, and that people do have access to these services, that we do crack down on trusts that prioritise the physical over the mental, and that do not get the help to people quickly enough, and that we do actually have professionals that are able to deal with this. The staffing for mental health services in the NHS has gone down dramatically. There has been ring-fenced funding, but that ring-fenced funding is not large enough, and often year on year represents a real terms cut. And for every politician who says that mental health is now a priority for them because now it's suddenly something they feel they can talk about, I feel that they need to match their words with actions. Real investment in mental health and a real culture change inside the NHS to give mental health the priority that it deserves.
The next question was submitted, but not in time for the candidates to actually receive it in advance. However, I'm going to ask it now. Air quality has been well documented as one of Thurrock's most pressing concerns. What steps will you take to ensure our youth can breathe clean air? And I'm going to ask Kevin to start answering that.
There we go. So that is a clear and pressing problem. One of the drawbacks to having the Dartford crossing is that congestion now often flows back throughout Thurrock. I come from South Grays. I know the London road is often bumper to bumper, and when you get as far as getting up to Purfleet and towards Lakeside, it's even worse. Now, having people sat in traffic means that you're having fumes pumping out, and actually it makes things a lot worse than traffic that's able to move freely. And this is something that the new crossing has been proposed is actually going to make worse. Now, we've outlined in our manifesto investment in things like more electric buses, which don't generate these fumes that cause people to get things like emphysema, asthma. But what we do actually need is a new crossing plan that doesn't bring more traffic through Thurrock, make this problem worse, exacerbate the issue we have going towards Dartford. And also we need to work on the traffic problems, more bypasses to get people around Thurrock and not using the same congested routes. And we also need for the first time for the council to lead on assessing where the problem spots are so we can actually work on these things. Now I think that it's a large problem that's ahead of us, but as we see in London with 9,000 deaths caused annually by air pollution, it's something we urgently need to tackle and need to start today.
Well, the first thing you do is you tell the government, no way in hell are we having this Thames crossing going through Thurrock. We have some of the worst air quality in Essex, in the country, and it's not going to work. You know, there's a reason why Highways England, when I asked them this at the Tilbury meeting, why did they not send a pack to every single home, every single person in the borough? It's because their facts and their estimates did not add up. This new crossing will only take 14% from Dartford if it was built now. When it is built, demand for that's going to go through the roof. So it's a £6 billion boondoggle that's not going to do anything for us at all. And I tell you for this, my commitment, I will stand in front of the tractors if I have to stop this. This is my home and I'm sick of being dumped on. But the second thing is overdevelopment. You know, the government are telling us we could have 20,000 extra houses, properties. That's people who will move here with their cars. You know, why isn't there a Maidenhead new town? Why not a Whitney new town? Oh, no, that's where the Prime Ministers have their constituencies. You know, they never put all of the big developments in their constituencies, do they? No, if in doubt, dump on Thurrock. Well, enough is enough. If you want change, on Thursday, vote for it. No more of the same, no more failures. Let's unite together, fight this Thames crossing and make sure we get a better deal for Thurrock.
Well, the reason we have such poor air quality is that our roads are too congested. And the truth is that a new Thames crossing in the right place would alleviate that. Now, I don't think anybody in this room likes the route that's been chosen. I certainly don't. I've been fighting it for the last 8 years. You can all laugh. That is the truth. That is the truth. And I'm afraid what I'm interested in is getting the best outcome for Thurrock. I'm not seeing this issue as a political opportunity. Now the truth is, if they'd chosen Route 4, that would have been a bypass. That would have, again, stopped the traffic could have gone up to the A127 and wouldn't have hit Thurrock's road network. That would have been the right choice. What is certainly the wrong choice is option A. And I know John's proudly saying that he's got persuaded the Labour Party to revisit these proposals. Well, let me tell you, John, that means that option A is back on the table and option B. Option B that we stopped before the last election, the crossing that was stopped at Tilbury, that's now under consideration. And I'll tell you this much, revisiting that decision means we're more likely to get another bridge alongside the one at Dartford. And I'll tell you now, constituents here in Thurrock will not wear that and it will make our air quality worse.
Are you telling me there's going to be a second crossing? I thought you'd stopped it, Jackie.
That's not the one in
Shush.
That's
In
not
Tilbury miles.
Really?
Well, if we can start with the question rather than some of the other stuff that's gone on. But the fact is, in this country, there are something like 80,000 premature deaths that are attributable to poor air quality. We know that the air quality in Thurrock is amongst the worst anywhere in the country outside of a major city. And that's something we have to address. Now, the Labour Party manifesto is very clear. The last time we had a revolutionary Clean Air Act was in the 1950s. That Clean Air Act led to the end of smogs in London. The Labour Party will bring forward a new Clean Air Act, one for the 21st century. It will contain things like a network of low emission zones. It will insist that local authorities work together to make sure we move traffic and transport around in a more a more environmentally friendly way. It will make sure that we have common standards across the country, because they don't exist at the moment, that we have common tariffs, and we have strong penalties for when people break the rules. When it comes to the crossing, I'm afraid Jackie is simply wrong. The commitment from the Shadow Secretary of State is to review the decision to press ahead with option C. He has now explicitly ruled out reopening up a debate on option A and option B. What he will, however, do is to revisit options further east, the so-called options D and E, that were prematurely jumped by the last government. We all know that building another crossing at the government's preferred route at option C will merely lead to some kind of triangle of toxicity in the middle of the borough. It will lead to worse air quality, it will lead to more people in Thurrock suffering from the kind of chest conditions that we see all too readily. And I'm afraid, Jackie, you can say that you've been fighting this for 9 years, you've flipped and you've flopped. You know, you've said that you were against option C. You said in your election material in 2015 that you'd stopped the crossing. You said on the 12th of April on BBC Essex that my constituents, to a man, want this crossing. Now, you know, Jackie, you've flipped and you've flopped, and I'm afraid in this one you've let us down.
We have now come to the end of the questions that were previously submitted. I've got a question at the front on your right. Excuse me if I get my left and right mixed up, I regularly do. Can I really ask that what we're here to do is to listen to the candidates. We're here to try to understand which candidate is going to do the best for Thurrock. So we want to hear their views, not yours. So that what we're really after is a short, sharp question that gets a good response. I've noticed there's one gentleman with glasses in the middle at the back, if Darren could keep an eye on him for the next question. But thank you.
Do the candidates believe that anyone can do well something they have long said they do not believe in? Can you do well something you have long said you don't believe in? For instance, I believe in Brexit, I don't believe in Brexit, and then you take a different view.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Tim to start the answer to this question.
I was worried about where that question was going. No, I think, you know, we've got, if you believe in, if you say you're going to get immigration down to the tens of thousands and don't, if you vote Remain and then say Brexit must mean Brexit, there's a trust issue. And we're told time and time again, every election, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And, you know, with the UKIP platform, you know, if you voted for Brexit, you're going to get Brexit. We've managed to get so far now pushing the other parties to commit to a referendum when they never wanted to give us one. We got the outvote when they said there was an impossibility. Remember the polls saying Remain was 10 points ahead and so on and so forth. We fought it and we won. And now we've got to make sure that we're there to finish the job. Because we don't want this to be another political letdown. We've been let down so many times. Remember 24 hours to save the NHS? Remember we wouldn't introduce tuition fees? Remember we would get immigration under control? Every single time we've been let down. And if you want to be let down again, vote for any one of those three. But if you want change, if you want a local man, if you want someone who's going to go and fight for Thurrock, then pick me on Thursday.
So I take it to mean that the question means, can the government do a good job with Brexit? I don't believe so. I think that Theresa May, strong and stable as she started out, has quickly become incompetent, dangerous and reckless with the future of this country. I think she's alienated the very people that she's got to negotiate with, likely in around on the 19th. And I think that she's going to damage our trade with Europe. I think she's going to make a mockery of this country on the world stage. And I'm not going to denigrate any candidate how they did or didn't vote in the European referendum, but do I think this government, led by Theresa May, who said that she saw the best future for the United Kingdom inside the European Union, and she said it make us more prosperous, more secure, and better off. Things that I still agree with, which apparently she doesn't. Do I think she'll make a good job of Brexit? No, I don't. I think she'll be an absolute disaster for this country.
I was kind of racking my brains to try and think of an example of where someone or something, or body of people who campaigned against something, lost and then made a pretty good job of it. The one that comes to mind is the BMA and just about every doctor in the country arguing and fighting against the introduction of the National Health Service, and actually by and large doctors have made a pretty good stab of it since 1947. On Brexit, you know, I have a kind of regard for what Theresa May is trying to do. Theresa May campaigned to stay in the European Union. The referendum was held. People of the country said, we're leaving. And as a Democrat, she stood up when people like David Cameron kind of exited stage left before they'd even finished counting the votes, I think. But she actually stood up and said, I will take this challenge on and I will get the best deal that I can for this country, regardless of how I voted. And I think, if for no other reason, I think Theresa May just deserves a little bit of credit for that. I also voted to remain, not to leave. I'm also a Democrat. I accept the view of the British people, and the job now is to get on with exiting the European Union, supposedly now in 22 months' time, but getting a Brexit deal that works for people here in Thurrock, that protects jobs, that maximises the opportunity for trade, not only with those remaining countries within the European Union, but with countries across the world. Tim said earlier that we have 2 ports in Thurrock. If you spread Thurrock more widely to the neighbouring sea, you have 3 with London Gateway. So London Gateway, Tilbury and Purfleet. We have many, many jobs here that rely on trade. Those jobs need free trade, as free as they can get, and they need minimal bureaucracy. Leaving the single market will cause issues. Leaving the customs union will cause horrendous issues. We need to make sure we get a deal that minimises the bureaucracy and maximises our chances of thriving in the future.
Some of the issues we've got to grapple extremely well. The reality is, we stood on a manifesto promise to have a referendum and deliver the decision of the British people. Now, for some people in this room, there are very clear views, one way or another, whether we should stay in or leave. But actually, for most people, it was a moot point. And in the end, 52% of the British people voted to leave, 48% voted to remain. Now, we need to take everyone with us. And that requires mature discussions with our European colleagues so that we do leave as friends and we get the best deal for Britain. And absolutely, I think Theresa May is by far the best person to complete that job.
There was a question, hand up, the gentleman with the beard and the glasses.
Keeping things more local, regular events that, like this borough and other boroughs in Essex, are travel incursions. Now, it costs the ratepayer here money to repair the land, to clear up the filth and the flight tickets associated with this. Now, I remember the leader of our council has said we have sufficient powers, the council and the police, to deal with this problem. Do you think that the council and the police have sufficient powers to deal with this problem that plagues us every year and costs us, one example, over £6,000 from Chapel St Mary Hill, which has been attacked again this year, to clear up? It's a waste of ratepayers' money. Do you think we have enough legislation to deal with this regular event? Thank you.
I'm going to ask Jackie to start the answer to this question.
I think there's a good argument for reviewing legislation, and specifically around offences of trespass, because it is extremely frustrating that it often takes a long time to deal with travel incursions. But I'm advised by the police that one of the difficulties they have is that there isn't a transit site that these travellers can be directed to. And again, I think we would struggle to have a mature debate about as to where to cite such a thing. But I think overall, we should revisit the actual pattern of legislation, because over and over again, there is a real nuisance here, and we need to make sure that the settled community are not disadvantaged by people abusing their rights.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'm not sure we do have all the powers that we need. I think people get incredibly frustrated, quite rightly, at the length of time it takes to move a travel incursion on. The bureaucracy that you have to go through is just quite bizarre. So a travel incursion pitches up on some public land. You have to go and ask them to leave. You serve a notice, they don't leave. You go to the High Court. That's another 3 days. The High Court will give you an injunction. You serve the injunction, they refuse to obey the injunction. You have to go back to the High Court to get an order that allows you to instruct a bailiff. That gives them more time. And on the day that notice is running out, the bailiffs are coming in, they just move on. One of the changes in legislation that would be really helpful would be to allow public authorities, whether they be local councils, health authorities or whatever, to be able to move incursions on from their land without having to go through the rigmarole of going to the High Court and then going back to the High Court. Just give us the power to use reasonably to move people on when they're causing difficulties. That would be a huge, huge help.
Thank you.
Sorry. So there is a strong argument for review of the legislation we currently use to move travellers on. I think that the situation that John outlines is frankly ridiculous and something we do need to get under control. But it's not just a matter of powers, but actually do we have the resources to deal with this problem? You know, in Essex is one of the most overstretched police forces in the entire country and one of the most underfunded. And I know when I was the candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner last year, I met the Police Federation, and they said at any given time in this part of Essex, which stretches from Harlow down to Thurrock in the south, there's around 15 police officers ready to respond to any given call. Now what we need to do is actually look at this legislation, but actually need to invest in the institutions that we expect to carry out our wishes. We do need a quicker, more efficient court system. We also need to support our police officers and invest in them to give them the resources to actually deal with the problems that people here in Thurrock say are a concern. So I do think that the powers need to be looked at again, but I also think that if we want to get different results, we actually need to invest properly in the systems that we expect to deliver them.
Yeah, the law does need to be changed. The government changed the law on squatting. I think that was an opportunity to review the law for unauthorised traveller sites. But again, the problem is the police cuts. There was that illegal rave at Bevis Woods when the police turned up, saw lots of people there, and then went away. It's not good enough, is it?
A couple of questions over here, Darren. Miles and the gentleman just behind. And then we've got time for one more question after that. And I think the gentleman next to the first question was probably one of the early ones to have his hand up.
Do you know what the Naylor report is? Could you explain what your belief that it represents? And does your party support its main recommendation?
I'm going to ask John if you could start with the answer to that one, please.
Miles, tell us a little more about the Naylor report.
Right, the Naylor report says that NHS trusts that are cash-strapped will have no access to public funds for equipment purchases such as MRI scanners unless they sell land or hospitals And the incentive for this is a government bribe of £2 from the Treasury for every £1 raised from the sale of assets, such as land and hospitals. In other words, it's NHS privatisation.
I think Naylor has spoken about a kind of broad range of things. I wanted to know specifically what Miles was driving at. It does come back to this fundamental point that the NHS has been starved of funding for too long. We do need to see more money going into care, to adult social care, to health care, and into making sure that we can properly fund hospitals. You know, we have some tremendous doctors, nurses, other professionals working in the health service, but too often they're working with outdated, old, decrepit equipment. And, you know, frankly, it is pretty scandalous that NHS trusts are now being bribed to sell off lumps of land in order to kind of make ends meet to be able to buy the vital equipment that they need. It's one of the issues that we're seeing on the doorsteps here. All of us that have been on doorsteps would have seen it. People really concerned about the future of Orsett Hospital. Orsett Hospital under threat of closure because the trust that runs it hasn't invested in it over the years and now says it will cost too much money to bring it back into good order. You know, frankly, that should never ever have been allowed to happen. We've got to make sure that we get the funding the NHS deserves, get it to the right places, and we've got to start doing that as quickly as we can.
That's not a narrative that I recognise, actually. And one of the things that, you know, we'd still be treated in Victorian workhouses if we didn't renew our NHS estate. And one of the things that we need to do is NHS Trust should be free to sell that land if they want to reinvest it in new improved facilities. And that's exactly what's going to happen with regard to Orsett Hospital. And that's what we should do. We should make sure we can't actually preserve this servicing aspect. That's not how we deliver good services. We need to deliver the most modern and the most best with the best facilities, and that's what that's intended to do. It will also mean that more money will go into those trusts because the land sold will be used to build housing, much needed housing, because we have got a real shortage. So I'm afraid we need to make some really grown-up decisions about this.
I'm going to ask Tim to answer. Let me see if I get Jackie's logic right. NHS trusts have to sell off land and reduce their services, which will make things better. Well, how about you build the hospitals first, you invest in Thurrock, you bring the money home, you give us the Thurrock Hospital we were promised nearly 10 years ago, and then you talk about what you want to do about renewing the equipment and so on and so forth. You know, we had this discussion last time about, oh, the Grange Walking Centre needs to go, because we're going to get these wonderful new hubs, these new health hubs. Still waiting, aren't we? You know, how many times are we going to be told, oh, these great new things are coming, but these things have got to go first? Well, if you're replacing something, you need to make it automatic, rather than just taking something away and then saying, yeah, we'll be with you soon, and then the weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and we get nothing. Again, Thurrock is being left behind, and you've had no one going to fight for it. And if you want the same, then vote for the same. But if you want change, you've got to vote for it on Thursday. Because we can't afford 5 more years of cuts, we can't afford 5 more years of our services going away, we can't afford it here. We're an important part of the country, we're the beating heart of the country, we deserve better.
So I think there's a sort of curious logic to that specific proposal. I know last year the Liberal Democrats suggested that we could sell brownfield land that public bodies own to actually raise money to do other things with it, and I think that makes sense where we have assets that aren't being used. But I do think the idea of selling assets such as hospitals to raise money for future assets just sends the NHS into a sort of death spiral. You know, because what will happen in the short term, and probably the long term as well, because you know how these things work, is that the hospital disappears and all of a sudden you're now travelling to Basildon to receive healthcare. It doesn't become more local at any point. You've now just got this cash that the government says it will match by £2 for every £1 raised, but you don't actually have the longer term strategic investment to actually improve the NHS. I think this fix that the report is outlining is a way to find cash in the short term. It actually shows, I think, the Conservatives' lack of strategic vision and idea of the future for our NHS. I think we deserve a lot better than this when it comes to talking about the future of our NHS. We need a detailed investment plan. We don't need this magic money tree that the Conservative manifesto likes to talk about, but actually uses throughout all of its pages. We actually need a costed plan for our NHS, and we can't just have a fire sale every time we run out of cash. The reason why so many of our trusts are running deficits is because they're not receiving the investment that they need. It's not the idea that trusts are being inefficient, it's that they do have more demand, but not more cash to meet this increased demand. I think it's really that simple. And that's why we've said we put a penny on the pound in income tax to raise the cash that we need to invest for the future for our NHS. So I don't think it's a good proposal. I think it's rash. I think that it will damage the NHS in the longer term. And I think we need to do more to actually put the NHS in the longer term stable footing.
Because one thing that was missed out of all the answers was, does your party support its main recommendations? And no one answered that part of the question.
I think we need to know that that's your opinion, but to move on.
We could do with some questions from women. One of the observations in the 2015 Hustings was there was an overbalance of male questioners and not female, and everybody that's asked a question so far has been male. So let's try and pull that.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just missing the lady.
There's one right there.
There's a lady here.
Yeah, she's with the chat.
Oh, right, sorry.
Hiya. Tuition fees are going up and up, and I just want to know what you're going to do for young people to encourage them to go to university. I've seen some of your manifestos and I've not seen anything talking about that, so I'm keen to know.
Tuition fees. I'm going to ask Kevin to start on tuition fees.
I'm sorry, God, this has been a long 7 years. But I'll talk about tuition fees. And so currently the government proposals that they're going to start upgrading tuition fees in line with inflation before a few years down the line thinking about linking it to actually the performance of different universities. So currently we're seeing, I think it was in the last few days of this Parliament, we've actually seen tuition fees legislated for an increase above the £9,000 currently allowed right now. Now what we've said is that the tuition fee system we have now does encourage greater access than it did under the previous system. People now start paying their tuition fee loans back later, and for the graduates who receive the least value from their tuition fee loan, they will pay back the least over its lifetime. Now what we've said in our manifesto is that we do need to restore things like grants for the most disadvantaged students so they can actually access university. When I went to university, I benefited from a number of grants, and I know without that, I would not have been able to afford to go. Tuition fees for me weren't a problem. High living costs, you know, paying for things like heating and utility bills and food, they were the issues for me when I was at university. So I think tuition fees is almost misses the point, and I think this is why the Labour proposal to spend such a huge amount on abolishing tuition fees is completely wrong-headed. When if you look at Scotland, the issue there is that they've abolished tuition fees, and now most people who go to university come from the middle and upper classes. Working class people no longer have a ladder to get to university. So I think following that system would be a mistake, but I do think we should continue to invest in the most disadvantaged pupils so they continue to access and continue to make their way in life.
Yeah, I think we will look back at the proposal to introduce tuition fees when they said they'd legislated to not introduce them was one of the biggest conflicts in history. And we've said that we would abolish tuition fees for the sciences, technology, engineering, maths and medicine. What we think are strategic subjects that will help people achieve the best and be beneficial to the country. It's not a proposal to abolish all, but it's the ones that we believe that are the most beneficial to the country, the ones that will put us on big league tables of the crucial industries. So it's not to do away with them, but it's the ones we believe are strategically important.
Well, being brutally pay for. And if we don't raise that money through tuition fees, we have to raise it from ordinary taxpayers. And I don't think it's fair to expect people who are going to earn a lot less than graduates to pay for that education. What we need to make sure is that the method of payback is fair and that people are only expected to pay back when they're earning good salaries, and we've certainly achieved that. More importantly, it's about making a serious economic decision about whether this is going to be in your benefit. For a long time, young people were encouraged to go to university and come out with degrees that actually haven't got them any enhanced employment that they would have done if they'd have left school at 18. So, yeah, I recognise that it's a big choice for someone considering going to university, but actually it does need to be framed in that way, because it does have to be paid for in the end, and we can't expect ordinary taxpayers to do it.
I don't think it's only a question of tuition fees, to be quite honest. If you're a young person now that's looking to go to university, you can look at a 3-year course, £9,000 a year tuition fees that you have to borrow, then another £6,000 a year living expenses that you have to borrow. You're looking at young people being saddled with £45,000 or more of debt as they start their life. And I think, frankly, that's just wrong. You look at the way that the debt is calculated, you look at the way the interest rate is calculated, so now those people that are paying back are about to see the interest rate go up by a third. You know, I think a third increase in the rate of repayment is almost usury. I just think, again, that's wrong. You know, we heard Jackie say that why should everybody pay the costs of somebody's tuition when that person's going to earn more money in the future? Well, frankly, Jackie, it's because they're the people that are going to be the doctors that we need, the teachers that we need, the scientists that we need, the researchers that we need. These are going to be the captains of industry. You know, again, we live in what is still the 6th richest country in the world. We need to be investing more in our young people. We need to be making sure that our young people can be the best that they can without being saddled with crippling debt as they start their life. Now, I think Kevin has said it on many occasions, the Labour Party manifesto is fully costed. The costings are there. The money to pay for tuition fees comes from an increase in corporation tax on the biggest corporations in the country. That's big business paying back to help young people. I think that's the right thing to do.
My question is, it's noted that we need 20,000 homes around this area. Can someone please tell me, who are they for? They're not for the young people because they can't afford them. If you look at the deposit a young person has to find to buy a modestly priced home, they have to find at least £40,000. Where's the 20-year-old going to get that from? Thank you.
I'm going to ask Tim to start the answers to this question.
Yeah, it's always building homes in Thurrock, isn't it? You know, we don't ever see, again, I'm still waiting for the Maidenhead Newtown. You know, we're all meant to be in this together, aren't we? So why doesn't the Tory Shires get their chunk of the house building for a change? It is a sad state of affairs. You know, I get people coming into the office on a daily basis who can't get on the council list, they're struggling to afford the sky-high rents, and something needs to be done. We need to build more council homes. That has to start. You know, I think it's crooked that we've got these planning laws that give developers, you know, they have to do an advisory third of affordable homes, but then that number gets whittled down as time goes on. No, what I would like to see is if you're going to build a development, you give a chunk of that. So maybe if you're building 100 homes, 30 of them go to the council as council homes. No more 106 money. No more fob-ups, no more lies. Give the council homes, because we need council homes. We're looking at a future, you know, where people will be living at home till they're 50. You know, homes of multiple occupation are starting. It's really sad. You know, Englishman's home is their castle. And we should be making sure that we have more homes, but also we need to make sure that we manage the demand. You know, we can't go on with having 250,000 more people enter the country than leave. It's outrageous. And so we need to get a grip on that. And we're the only ones with a sensible plan to do so. The Tories have told you time and time again they're going to get control of immigration. Look at their record and you'll see they failed.
So I think the problem of the housing for young people, obviously something I understand, but you know, part of the problem, reason that our house prices are so high is that since the 1950s we haven't been building houses in the numbers that we need. I'm sure many people in the audience have seen the film Kathy Come Home, and you know it's an issue that's not a recent one, but it's certainly one that's getting worse year on year. Part of it is that we have these arcane planning laws that make it hard for anyone to actually develop anything anywhere. And then you get the issue where these large developers get their planning permissions, they'll dig a little bit, then they'll up sticks and they'll go off until the land value goes up. And you have land banking going on, something that the government has not gotten tough on. Now I think if we really want affordable homes for young people, we need not just the market to take care of it, which has been successive governments, their policy, but we need the government to have a proactive hand in it as well. We need around 300,000 homes annually just to keep up with demand. Now, we've got to be honest that that's going to be a major public investment programme. Now, currently we're building nowhere near that amount, and if we ever want young people to get on the housing ladder, as they used to 30, 40 years ago, we need to get honest about that problem, and it will mean more houses in places like Thurrock, and there's a debate to be had about where the best places for those are. I know we've got a new development on London Road, and I can't think that's going to make the congestion problem there any better. But I do think we need to take seriously these proposals for garden cities. So building new towns where one doesn't exist, rather than trying to shoehorn in homes in every single square metre you can find. We need to be really creative about the sort of country we want to create. We need to look at new towns, and with that comes new train stations, new infrastructure, and not just dumping on places that are becoming more and more densely populated, because at the end of the day, people want to live in these places. We want to create places that people actually want to enjoy growing up, and raise families, and you know, grow to love. And you know, Thurrock is a great place to live, but if we carry on dumping on Thurrock without looking at how we can invest more broadly and spread it around the country, Thurrock won't be a great place to live. So I think we need a national programme to tackle housing deficiency, and not one that just keeps on dumping and dumping.
John. I think it's a really interesting question, and you used the figure of 20,000. If we go back, Thurrock in 2005 agreed that it would build 17,500 homes over a period of 21 years. We have come absolutely nowhere near that because we're just not delivering enough new homes. Eric Pickle's response to that was to increase the target to 20,000. You haven't done well enough, therefore you've got to do more and more quickly. I really struggle to see how we're going to develop that amount of homes here in Thurrock without up front having the kind of infrastructure that we need. And that's not only about roads, that's about schools, school places, it's about health services that we need, it's about making sure that we have the green spaces that we need, the kind of softer stuff, where are the playing fields, all that kind of stuff. You know, I have to say, I listened to Tim telling us that we're being dumped on 20,000 homes, where are we going to put them? I have to remind him that it was the leader of his group on the council of UKIP that signed a letter alongside the Conservative leader of the council to something called the Heseltine Commission that said that they believe there is room in Thurrock for 30,000 new homes. I frankly don't see where there's room for 30,000, an equivalent of 6 Chafford hundreds here in Thurrock. But more broadly, we do face a housing crisis. You know, young people believe that they will never have the opportunity to own a home of their own. Young people, especially young people in London, maybe not in Thurrock, don't believe they'll ever be able to afford to rent a home of their own. So we have to address that. Something has to be done. And that means building significant numbers of new affordable homes. It means being imaginative about how we help people onto the housing ladder. That means, I think, government-backed schemes such as shared equity, where people can buy half of their home and then as the price goes up, be able to sell and cash in the increase so that they can move on. But I think this is one of the most pressing issues in this country at the moment. We know that homelessness has risen by something like a third over the last 5 years. We're seeing it more and more in Thurrock, and we're going to see it nationally. We genuinely have to get to grips with this by starting to build affordable homes up and down the country. And frankly, there is no time to lose on getting on with doing that.
Well, I've said before that the challenge of affordable housing is probably one of the most significant if we're going to look after future generations. And the problem we've got is the combination of the credit boom and the failure to build enough houses for decades, actually. I mean, every time governments have tried to fix it, it's just created another problem elsewhere. It just showed that government interventions are often well-intentioned, but often deliver contrary outcomes. And if I look back, liberating the buy-to-let market was designed to encourage more people to buy houses to then let on, but that's created another set of distortions, and actually partly responsible for the rise of homelessness that you referred to, John. So there has been a market failure in terms of delivering private sector housing, so government does have to step in again, and the proposal we've got in our manifesto is that we will build more council housing to offer to tenants on a fixed term let, and at the end of that time they'll be offered the chance to buy it through a new enhanced right to buy. So some of them will choose to, some of them will choose to go the private route, but that is designed to replenish our social housing stock. And really, that is going to have to be the solution because, as the lady mentioned, the size of the deposit is impossible for a first-time buyer who's frankly less than 50. And even then it's going to be a struggle. So we've really got to be imaginative and we've got to grasp this. But also we do need to grasp the challenge of building more homes. And, we often get told, build on brownfield before you build on greenfield. That's all very well, but again, as Kevin's alluded to, that has caused massive problems in London Road because we're building flats, people are having more and more cars, and it's just adding to the congestion problems there. So we do need to have a very mature discussion about where we will build new communities, and it will mean new communities.
Thank you. We've got time, I'm afraid, for only one last question. Forgive me if I haven't seen your hand. The microphone's in somebody's hand, so don't worry about putting your hand up now. The lady here is going to speak. Forgive me if I've missed you earlier.
Thank you very much. We've talked a lot about young people this evening, and I would like to ask the panel what they intend to lobby an opposition government, or indeed their government, on for older people. What we've seen in Thurrock for many years now is, especially in the last Tory years, is a deterioration in living standards for our older people. I am one of them. We see now that we've got many people over 60 on ESA, where they have now no longer a right to retire at age 60, especially women, and you ask for a woman to comment, and I see many women in our society that are struggling just to make ends meet, as well as looking after their grandchildren, etc., etc. So I would like to ask every individual on this panel, what are you going to do, or what are you going to lobby on for older residents of Thurrock, of which there are many? Thank you.
Well, you're absolutely right, Barbara. The challenges of an ageing population are ones that we need to grapple with. Obviously, we're retaining the double lock on the pensions to make sure that we continue to give adequate rises, because for a long time the pension was allowed to get out of step with earnings. But the biggest challenge is actually the rise in the number of over 75s that we're going to see. And I know when I go around, I'm increasingly aware that 2 generations ago, people's families used to stay in the same place, so you'd always have that network of support when people got older and the families would look out for them. Now people move around a lot more and are much more dependent on services in the community to look after them as they get elderly, so we've got to deal with that. Obviously we've had a lot of discussion about our proposals for adult social care in the manifesto. Not the best communicated, it has to be said. But at the moment, you'll risk losing your house if you go into care, and only £23,000 worth of assets are protected. We're going to make sure that nobody has to sell their house, and that protection will extend to 100,000. But I think together, we all need to accept this as a problem, and let's look out for our neighbours. We all know somebody who lives near us, who lives on their own, and is getting elderly. It doesn't do any harm to go around and make sure that they're all right and to do their shopping, because that's what they need. A lot of the time, they get the difficulties being mobile and actually being able to get out and see people. And one of the things that I've been really impressed with is the former Mayor's initiative on that regard, with Plates with Mates, where she encourages people to come round and get together and have a meal. So lots more of that. It's very easy to look to the state to do everything, but we can all do something as a community.
John.
Jackie talks about retaining the double lock. What that actually means is scrapping the triple lock. That is that pensions will go up in line with inflation, with earnings, or by 2.5%, whichever is the greater. That was a triple lock that was actually introduced by the Conservatives and something that I welcomed. It has seen many, many pensioners move out of poverty. And I think we drop it at our peril because we risk going backwards, and we shouldn't be doing that. I would lobby that we don't drop the winter fuel allowance for pensioners. Again, Jackie accused us earlier of scaremongering. The fact is, there are 2 million pensioners in this country that are on pensioner credit. It's those 2 million that will continue to receive the winter fuel allowance. The other 10 million pensioners will lose it, and that's not something that I would support, and not something that the Labour Party would support. We then look at paying for care, the so-called dementia tax. I think the bit of this that people are overlooking, that just hasn't been communicated, is this is to pay for care that people receive in their own home. So this is when people are coming in to help folk to get out of bed in the morning, to help them eat, to help put them to bed at night, stuff that very often is now provided by the state, everybody will have to pay for. And again, I just think that's wrong. I think that as a society, we should be banding together to help people in their old age. And finally, as Barbara kind of touched on it, the so-called WASPy women. Those women from the 1950s who weren't given adequate notice that the state retirement age was going to rise, didn't have the ability or time to pay in and make sure they got a decent pension. We need to look at how we compensate those women. And again, I'm really proud that the Labour Party manifesto says that that's what we'll do.
So I suppose much in John's statement I would commend. The Lib Dems led on Theresa May's dementia tax, and we said it wasn't just, the idea that they'll take you home at the end of your life, they'll take your children's school meals, they'll take everything from everyone that's basically in this manifesto. But actually, by moving to charging people for their in-home care, it's such a massive transfer of wealth. Now, the interesting thing is that the same people who were given the right to buy in the 80s are now given the right to lose their home as they go into their old age. I don't think that's acceptable. I mean, we talk about opportunity and people getting their own homes and people living prosperous lives, but actually all that happens is all smoke and mirrors. The WASPy women in particular, I don't think were given enough, notice of when they was going to lose their pensions. I don't think the government has actually looked at how they can mitigate this, because it does create a problem for women for around 6 years when we move the age from 60 up to 66. And I don't think we really want to create a generation of people that are on benefits going into their golden years, and I think that's completely unacceptable. I do think the dementia tax, I think, is probably the biggest problem, and I think if the Liberal Democrats did form the opposition in the next Parliament, something we would want to do is press the government on dropping this dementia tax. The reason why Theresa May spun in circles on this is because she thought no one would notice, and now she knows it's toxic, and this is why I think we can really apply pressure on her and get her to drop this dangerous, nasty proposal.
I agree with much of what's been said. One thing that I would what strikes me every year is that figure of around 20,000 excess winter deaths. And you all know well, but that's mostly older folk who have to choose between heating and eating. And so we've said in our manifesto, we'll do over VAT on domestic energy bills to make it a bit easier. You know, we'd keep the winter fuel allowance, we'd keep the triple lock. But personally, you know, my nan, I lost my nan with she had dementia. And what I would personally lobby for is much more research into dementia and Alzheimer's. Because it's one thing to say that the care has to be there, but if research funding can be allocated to try and reduce the numbers of people who need that care, I think we need that as well as making sure there is care for people if they do need it.
That draws us to a close of this evening. Thanks to everybody for asking questions, for listening to the answers. Thanks to all four candidates. Thanks to Richard for chairing and for those who made refreshments. Maybe we can show our appreciation. The Church of England doesn't have a political party that it's endorsing, but we would very much encourage everybody to vote because it's part of the democratic country of which we're part. I'm going to finish, if you will allow me to lead a prayer as we pray for our country and for the general election on Thursday. Lord, we give you thanks for the privileges and responsibilities of living in a democratic society. Give us wisdom to play our part at election time, that through the exercise of each vote, your kingdom may come closer. Protect us from the sins of despair and cynicism. Guard us against the idols of false utopias, and strengthen us to make politics a noble calling, that serving the common good of all. Amen. Amen. Wish you a safe journey and a good election day on Thursday.